welcome to our channel, Dark Window. I am your host, Jim Mann, and tonight we have a very special guest, a friend of mine, along with being a very important investigator and researcher for the entire UFO community. His name is Michael Schratt. Michael is a private pilot. He's an aviation historian. He's been investigating UFO encounters for over 25 years. Between 2008 and 2009, Michael meticulously reviewed a minimum of 50,000 cases, which were preserved at the Center for UFO Studies, CUFOS, archives in Chicago. In an effort to maintain an important part of our national history, Michael has recreated dozens of highly credible UFO cases by the use of drawings, illustrations, and commissioned artwork. And I can tell you, I've seen many of those pictures. They are phenomenal. I could go on and talk about Michael for hours, but let me just say, welcome, Michael, and it's good to have you. And so what's going on?
Hi, Jim. It's good to be with you. You're a good friend. Good friend.
Gosh, it's been like, about 15 years since we've known each other. I met you down there in Tucson at the
been a while.
Yeah.
Been a while.
Back in the days when George Parks was the Arizona State Director, and you were speaking at the library there in Tucson.
That's right.
Yeah. When I first sat down, first off, let me back up. That room was packed, Michael. I walked into that little room there in the back of the library, and it may have seated 150 people, if that much. But regardless, it was packed. There was standing room only. And Mike, I got to tell you, when I sat down and you started your PowerPoint presentation, I was captivated. I didn't move until you were done. And so I know what I'm in store for. I know what everyone is in store for here.
Sure.
And I know that you're a humble man, and you're trying. And I don't want to embarrass you here on the air, but it's you give credit where credit is due. Hey, Mike. Okay, to start off our program.
Yep.
Let's get going here. Can you describe how that Leonard Stringfield UFO Crash Retrieval case became sort of like the holy grail of ufology? Can you clue us in on that one?
No problem. Okay, so the way this story begins is, we've been in this field for over 75 years now. If you count Kenneth Arnold, June 24th, 1947, we're past the 75-year mark. Now, if you go to 1946 with the ghost rockets in Sweden, now we're even further back, but you can take it even further back than that because the 1897 mystery airship wave was over 100 years ago. So literally, we're pushing well over 100 years now in this field. And my thing is, the crusade is, what do we know now that we didn't know then? Now, we've made some progress, we have. But yet, do we still have the exact answer for this phenomenon? Do we really know what these things are, where they're from, when they're from? Are they extraterrestrial? Are they interdimensional? Are they USOs? Are they UFOs? Or are they a combination of all of them? That's the questions that we kind of want to talk about today. And we're going to search for some of the answers. And the person that I feel personally that got closer than anyone before in this field was a man named Leonard Stringfield. He's no longer with us. He died in 94. And in 1978, he was at the MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio. And he gave a lecture called Retrievals of the Third Kind. And it was kind of the first time that the whole concept of UFO crash retrievals really came to the forefront. We've heard a little bit prior to, but this was the first time it was officially presented. And he had about 12 cases that he presented. And then after the lecture, again, this is 1978, Dayton, Ohio, MUFON Symposium. After the lecture, he kind of put out a call to the audience and he said, if you or someone you know has firsthand experience dealing with autopsies, dealing with debris, dealing with UFO crash retrievals, if you were someone which was a high-level military brass that was present when a craft was put on an 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy and shipped to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, those are the kind of witnesses that he was putting a call out for pilots, air traffic controllers, astronauts, cosmonauts, high-level military brass, generals, defense contractors. Very high-level, high-power witnesses is what Leonard was looking for, first-hand military witnesses. So after the lecture was over, he went on a vacation with his wife, Dell, like a 2-week vacation. And so we thought, well, why don't we go to the post office and we'll see what we got here, and we'll see if there's any response. So he went into the post office, he opened up his P.O. box, he looked inside, and guess what he found, Jim?
I don't know. What did he find?
Crickets. There was nobody home, nothing there. So he looked a little bit closer, and there was this little card. He pulled it out, turned it around, and said, "See postmaster." So he walked over to the postmaster. He gave them this card, and the gentleman said, "Wait just a few minutes." So about 3 minutes, 5 minutes went by. Out come two big guys with these Santa sacks on. There were like 5,000 letters of people who knew or who were firsthand military witnesses. And so over a period of nearly 20 years, Leonard wrote these status reports. They're very hard to get, but what you can do is you can get this document. This is UFO Crash Retrievals, the complete investigation status reports 1 through 7. And you'll see here that it's a lot of dry reading here. There's no illustrations almost at all. And the other thing is, there's no names to go with the cases, because the agreement that Leonard had with his informants was that he would maintain an important part of our national history by getting the story out there, but the contacts had to remain anonymous. That's the agreement that he had with his witnesses. And so that's what we're left with. We're left with his legacy. But I feel he got closer than anyone, because he talked to these firsthand witnesses that saw the bodies, that handled the debris, that loaded the craft, that saw the craft up close, touched them, went inside, saw the bodies inside. That's the kind of information and physical evidence that we need to move this case forward. The entire field needs to have this physical evidence to move forward, and that's what we want to talk about tonight.
What are some of the cases that he's got in that book? What are the ones that like maybe a lot of people would know about?
Okay.
Is there like Roswell in there?
There's some things in Roswell, but there's a lot of obscure cases in here, and anyone can read this and anyone can formulate their own ideas of what this looks like. But really, without a drawing, we're just looking at text here. So the crusade has been to go through this book, which I've done multiple times, and then take meticulous notes. I don't know how well this shows up, but you can see every one of these is a case, and we're working through this entire document to illustrate the mission critical cases in this book. So at this point, we can share screen if we want to.
Yes, let's do that.
Let's do that. Okay.
I'm very interested in what you've got there. So
all right. So let's
you can go
see
ahead and
if
pop
this
something
works
up
here. Let's go share screen. Okay. All right. So now we're going to go here, enter here, share. So now I'm going to minimize. Can you see this? Are you able to see this?
No.
You don't see it.
Up.
It's not coming up. All right.
There it is, Mike.
You got it? Okay.
Got it.
From beginning. Okay, so I'm gonna forward here to our critical cases here, and we're gonna start right. We can start about right here.
Okay.
All right. So you're seeing this, right?
I am. Yes.
Good. Okay. Yeah. So, as you mentioned in the beginning, Jim, really, we as a group of ufologists, we just can't keep up with the CE1 cases anymore, because there are just thousands of them. A light in the sky case isn't going to do us any good. It's 2022. We've got hundreds of thousands of CE1 cases. A visual sighting isn't going to do us any good. What we need in this field is we need physical evidence, and nothing short of physical evidence is going to move this field forward. And that's where the crash retrievals come in. So
that's a
here's my
fact.
question.
Yes.
UFO crash retrievals, are they really the ultimate holy grail of ufology? They are, because they have everything wrapped up in one thing. They've got the bodies, the debris, and the craft all in one. So really, they are the holy grail. So what we want to do is we're going to start out with one of the cases from Leonard Stringfield, and this is December 1964, December 1963, and this is at Marine Corps Air Station, Cherry Point, North Carolina. And think about this. This is literally days after Kennedy was assassinated. Really just days. And so I wonder, is it possible that Kennedy could have known this? Could something have been here for a while before he was assassinated November 22nd, 1963? Okay, so Marine Corps Air Station, Cherry Point, and it's December 1963. And I've got a map here that shows you where this base is. So this guard kind of gets a call, and he says, well, we need you to report to this location. He boards a plane with blacked out windows, and he flies 3 hours from Cherry Point, North Carolina, to a place that he didn't know where it was because it was blacked out. And so here's the map on where he started his journey from. And he gets to this location, and he walks into this large, you could call it a building or a hangar, and there's this 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It looks like a fat hamburger. It's 15 feet tall. It has about 9 elliptically shaped opaque windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. It has a hatchway, Jim, on the bottom of the craft itself. And his words were, this thing was so fully integrated onto the bottom of the craft, you could not put a razor blade in between the seams. That's how fully integrated this hatchway was. And if you look at the bottom view here.
How could they even tell it was there?
Yeah, well, it was there, but it was very minute, extremely minute. We're talking Giza pyramid minute, where you couldn't even put a razor blade in there. These red dots at the bottom along the seam of the hatch are the quote-unquote attempted points of entry. And what they were trying to do, and I've got like 7 different cases now of the U.S. government trying to breach the hull of these crash retrievals. So the first thing we could say is that if this was one of ours, why were they trying to get inside? And they tried 3 methods, Jim. First, they tried diamond tip drill bits, and it was completely ineffective. Next one was an acetylene torch, useless. Third one, they brought in a laser back in 1963. They brought in a laser. They put the laser on this craft. They moved the laser away. It was warm to the touch, but other than that, no effect. And this is 1963.
This kind of sounds like the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Kind of.
Because they were doing the same thing.
Someone or something had the technology to beat the tensile strength of our diamond tip drills to get in. So let's keep moving forward here. Now, here is a new illustration done by my friend Joseph Wraith. He kind of put to color a lot of my original AutoCAD drawings, and so it really kind of makes it come alive. But that's what this thing looked like. You can imagine he walks in, he sees this thing, 40 feet in diameter, 15 feet tall. It had this chrome aluminum polished exterior with these opaque windows. And he also mentioned that there was a 1-inch lip between the outer skin of the craft and the outer part of these windows, a definitive 1-inch lip that he identified. All right, let's move forward here. 3D color graphics.
Yes. Was when he saw those craft, were they setting on the floor? Were they setting on the floor, or were they floating in the air? Or?
I'm glad you asked that question. There was only one there, and definitely want to give credit to Joseph Wraith, who did the full color illustrations here. But here's what they were trying to do, and I'm certainly going to answer your question. These were the 3 attempts here. Diamond tip drill bits, number 1, acetylene torch, number 2. And this is the type of laser they had back in 1963. They used this kind of a laser to breach the hull of this craft. So these were the 3 methods that they used. Now, Here's kind of a world exclusive. This is an original sketch by the actual U.S. Marine. He was interviewed by a contact that I got a hold of, who interviewed this Marine back in 1986, and they were kind of doing just a casual interview. And this gentleman that I knew who interviewed the Marine brought out a yellow pad sketchbook, and he said, "Can you draw a sketch of what this looked like?" And this is his sketch. This is the original sketch from the Marine himself. Now, it's pretty rough here, but you can see that the entire craft was propped up about 5 feet off the hangar floor on scaffolding. So they built scaffolding to support this thing, and they built a catwalk where you could walk around this entire craft. You could walk under it. There were 2 teams of white lab coat technicians that were basically trying to figure out how this thing works. What's the propulsion system? What's the tensile strength of the material? Now, if you look on the upper right and left-hand corners, you'll see lighting. And it was a very special type of lighting because this interior hangar installation was so well lit, quote unquote, you could not see a shadow on the ground. So they must have had lights on the corners, above, sides, below, all over. There were no shadows, and you would want that in this kind of a working environment. Now, this is another point. If you look on the bottom of the craft, you'll see these scribble marks, these dark scribble marks. Those are pads that were used to support the craft when it was on the scaffolding. It's the same type of pads you would see where they have a boat that's at a dock and they might need to raise it up. They have these pads that support the bottom of the hull. That's exactly what they were doing right here. So let's see if we can clean this up. And I'll take you to the next drawing here. Here is a drawing by Michael Johnstone. This is the gentleman that I know who interviewed the Marine back in 1986. And you can see the scaffolding here. You can see the craft. It's about 5 feet off the bottom, and you could walk under. They've got 2 ladders that allow you. And if you look on the left side of the craft, you can see that 1-inch lip between the outer skin of the craft and the outer portion of the windows themselves. And that was definitive. He mentioned it multiple times. So we're going to move on to the next slide, and we'll see if we can further clean this up. And so now, Jim, here's where we're at. This is what we're looking at here. This is what he saw when he walked in. This is approximately 2 scale. On the upper right-hand corner here, I've got a detail view that shows you that indented section. And we'll go down these bullet items here. Number 1, craft was seen at an undisclosed military location 3 hours by plane from Cherry Point, North Carolina. Number 2, the entire craft was surrounded with what looked like standard military aircraft scaffolding. Number 3, a white circle was taped to the floor, which outlined the prohibited area for Air Force generals. Next one, between 3 to 4 U.S. Marines guarded the craft while it was temporarily in the hangar. The quote-unquote windows of the craft were indented toward the interior, forming a 1-inch lip. See detail view, which we just looked at. Next one, the primary eyewitness secretly took a photograph of the saucer, which was later lost in a flood. Such a tragedy. Next one, a team of between 20 to 50 engineers examined the craft but were unable to gain access to the interior. So these are the mission-critical bullet items here. And we'll move on. So here is a cleaned up illustration of what this may have looked like when they actually were there. So you've got these lab coat technicians. They've got these notepads.
That's a great illustration there. That's a great picture.
Yep. So they had smocks on, laboratory type protective gear in many cases. We've got the ladders to get you there. This is all period correct scaffolding. We did a lot of research on what kind of scaffolding was around back then. And we've even got the pads. If you can look on the bottom of the craft, just above the upper section of the catwalk, the pads are supporting the bottom of the craft. Again, so this is by Joseph Wraith. So we'll continue going on here. So this was a drawing I commissioned by Jose Sanchez, just giving you an idea of what it might have looked like when they were trying to drill into this thing here. And you can see that they're having no effect on the craft itself, but the diamond tip drill is disintegrating. It's just falling apart under the extreme tensile strength of the craft itself. So again, no chance of getting in using that method. This was done by John McNeil. I commissioned this a long time ago, but this gives you a real good idea of what it looks like. So now when they were done, with the diamond tip drills and the acetylene torch. They brought in two 18-wheeler tractor trailers that had a power generating device on it, and there were two heavy thick gauge cables that came from these tractor trailers to the laser, and they were shining the laser on the skin of the craft. It was warm to the touch but had no effect. So my question is, were they ever able to get inside? And if they were they able to reverse engineer the molecular structure of the material, and they have incorporated that into our jet aircraft? Who knows? It's possible. When you throw billions of dollars at something, you might get a breakthrough. It's certainly possible.
It just makes me wonder what other industrial tools could they use to, if they can't get through it with a laser and diamond drill.
I've heard jackhammers and liquid nitrogen as well. It's some of the things they try to use to get in. And in some cases, it appears that liquid nitrogen has worked in other cases. So
really, okay,
they're trying everything under the sun to get in, and you can see why. They need to know how these things work. What makes them tick? What's the propulsion system? What is the fuel they're using? Are they using fuel? Those are all questions that maybe they've answered, maybe they haven't, but it's something that we should consider. Yep.
3 hours from North Carolina.
Cherry Point, North Carolina, 3 hours by plane. And we'll kind of go into where that might take you.
Yeah,
all right, so
that's...
let's move on here. And I want to take you kind of inside. This is kind of if you were outside trying to look inside this hangar, what would it look like? So we're getting up to the perimeter security here. We've got the chain link fence, and now we've entered the fence. We're kind of going into the scene. You've got the 18-wheeler tractor trailer getting ready to ship this thing out. We've got all the personnel ready here. I'm going to take you inside now. Well-lit facility. We've got armored personnel there guarding. We've got the lab coat technicians, very well lit. Now we're zooming in, kind of give you an idea. Is this what it looked like? We've got a couple of spooks here, CIA, NSA types. I'm sure they're monitoring the situation.
The minute
zoom in here. Now we're looking at the seams. We're looking at some possible effects here. Again, you can see the elliptical shaped windows. The gap is there. That's plainly in the seam. Here's an overall view looking down. This is about a 30-degree look down angle from above. It could very well look like this. We've got the perimeter here. Now, I will mention that there was a Navy Secretary of the Navy who attempted to breach this circle, and he was nearly shot. And that's your mandate, that's your order, is to shoot first and ask questions later. No questions asked. If you're there to guard this thing, you're there to guard it. No one is supposed to get through that thing unless you're properly badged. So let's continue on here. This is kind of a back view. They've got some crates in the background here. I would love to see this in real life. I'd love to know where it actually went. Okay, so now, the last day he was there, and he did take a Minax photograph of this too. He said that they were lifting the craft up off its stand. They were putting it on an 18-wheeler tractor trailer. They were putting a tarp on it and moving it to the next location. So that's kind of where we're going to go now here.
Michael, those are amazing pictures. Those that are only listening to the program instead of actually seeing the video. Yeah. Wow, I'm just blown away by
yeah, Joseph did a tremendous amount of research on this, and he's a very meticulous researcher. There's about 4 months of work on these illustrations, and it's all period correct. People are correct. The vehicles are correct. A lot of these things had to be modeled completely from scratch, and a tremendous amount of research was done to what NASA was doing at the time. What were they doing in the early space program? And so we've tried to duplicate that. All right, so we've got the cradle there. They're now going to be putting the tarp around this thing and then getting ready to move it to the next location. Here we're all tarped up. We're ready to move out. And you can see one of the ways that they use to keep this stuff under wraps is, number one, they compartmentalize it. And number two, no craft stays at any one location for any length of time. They keep moving these things from place to place. They don't keep all their assets in one location. Maybe Wright-Patterson Air Force might be the end road for all this, because all roads appear to lead to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. But during the time they're investigating, these things are moved around so not one person can keep tabs on where these things are. And that's why they've been able to hide this stuff for so long.
Yeah.
They
Now
keep
again,
moving.
excuse me, but now again, this is all based on
This is based
witness
on the testimony of a
test.
U.S. Marine who claims he guarded this thing for 2 weeks at this undisclosed location. He's the primary eyewitness.
That's amazing.
Yep, he's the primary eyewitness. All right, so now we're all tarped up. We're ready to depart now, and now we're loading up, or we're starting up our truck, and we're getting out of here. We're moving to the next location. It might be MacDill Air Force Base. It might be Langley Air Force Base. It might be Homestead Air Force Base. There are multiple repositories where they keep these craft and the bodies and the debris. All right, so now we're on the outside. We're getting ready to move out. And this is one of the original drawings that I commissioned Rudy to do for me. I want to give credit for him. So he kind of gave you an idea of what it might look like in a pencil sketch. Now let's see if we can get you here. Yeah, let's play this real quick video. Smuggled footage.
So there's no audio to this.
No audio, no. Kind of a, what would it be if you actually got footage?
Well, it's just amazing that you and your team, the guys that you know and work with, are able to put this together. This just brings 90% more to the story, Michael.
All right, so now we are at the point where they finish with the diamond trip drills. They finish with the acetylene torch. Now they're at the laser. And here you can see you've got the two heavy, thick gauge cables running from outside in. Now they're trying to breach the hull with the laser, and it's just reflecting off. In fact, if we move a little bit further here, you'll see what exactly took place. But this may be very close to what it looked like when they were trying to use the laser on the outside of the skin. It actually bounced off, reflected, and damaged a ceiling tile on the top of the facility. And that's mimicked in a very B movie that we'll talk about a little bit later here. Now, here's another original sketch. This is during the interview back in 1986, showing you the laser incident. And the craft is on the scaffolding. You can see the reflection point, and then here's where it came off and damaged the ceiling tile. So these are original drawings from the actual interview. All right, so here is Hangar 18. It came out in 1980. It's a B sci-fi movie. I don't recommend it, but there's three things in here, Jim, that we should discuss because they mimic what actually took place. Number one, in this movie and in this case, there were white lab coat technicians investigating the craft, inside the craft. So that checks out. Number two, there's scaffolding in this movie. And there was scaffolding in the case by the Marine as well, back in 1963. And in this movie, there's an incident with a laser. In the real life account, there's an incident with a laser. So my question is Hollywood a belated designer leak for something that actually took place? And some of that appeared in this movie.
That's been a question on everybody's mind for years about how so much of this reality makes its way into Hollywood, especially like Spielberg movies and things.
That's right. So, is this conditioning thing that we've heard about for years and decades now, is this conditioning a real reality, or are we just making this up? Well, if you go by the hundreds, maybe even thousands of movies where they're mimicking the form, fit, and function on something that actually took place, and they're throwing that into a movie, it certainly looks like they're trying to tell us something. And in this B movie, if you can make it through it, it's real cheesy. It has not held up well. There are three specific points that are virtually identical or very similar to a case that actually took place in 1963. All right, so now he also mentioned, this is from the Marine, he said that there were color-coded badges. And, if you had a green badge, you could go here, but you couldn't go here. If you had a yellow badge, you might be able to go here, but you couldn't go there. If you had a red badge, you had all access to the entire facility. So that's something that he mentioned as well. Okay, now his job was to guard this craft for 2 weeks, and he was also told to frisk everyone who came in. However, there was one point during the 2 weeks that he was there that he was left alone and no one frisked him. So he was able to sneak in a small Minox camera. And here he says, quote, "Someday I will tell this story, and by God, people are going to believe me." So he snapped a photograph of this craft on the scaffolding. But however, in 1983, the photograph was lost in a flood. So we were this close, Jim, to
Really?
getting this evidence. I mean, it would have been a step in the right direction. We were this close to getting it, but it's lost.
That's always the case. We get
It's always
right
the
to the
case.
edge,
It's
and
always the case.
something goes wrong.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Isn't that the case?
This is just amazing stuff here.
It's so frustrating because, people long before us, Jim, have come before us, and they weren't able to land the plane with this. I wouldn't call it a failure, but they couldn't produce the physical evidence that we're all looking for. And we have got to get drastic with this whole field. If we don't take this thing by the horns, and if we don't do something drastic, time's just going to slip by, and we're not going to know, and another generation is not going to know as well. So we have got to get drastic with this.
Michael, in all of your research, I mean, this is amazing stuff you have here, but in all of your research in the various cases, have you been able to piece together any sort of connections or similarities in any of these cases? I know I've spoke with you about stuff like this before.
Oh yeah, definitely. The more I go through the Leonard Stringfield cases, the more I'm seeing common denominators at the foundation level of the cases. Like we talked about already, the diamond tip drills, that keeps on popping up. The moving to the next location, delivery by courier, letters to different things. I keep seeing the same thing pop up in multiple cases. So when I see these pattern recognition, Jim, I think we can safely say we got it. We got it. We got them. We have enough smoke to know that there's fire at the end of this tunnel. We know it.
Well, we have to keep moving on here.
Yep.
I'm sorry we only have about 20 minutes left, and I know
Okay.
you've got a ton of stuff to talk
Oh
about.
no, we'll continue on. So here's what we came up with for the simulated Minox camera photo. This may have been actually what it looks like. So when you get a Minox photo, this is what the negative looks like. This is what it would perhaps look like. Paul Nintz, he was the Undersecretary of the Navy, November 29th, 1963 to June 30th, 1967. He would have been the one who tried to cross that line, and he would have been deflected by this Marine. So this is our guy in question here. Now, that brings us to 4-star Major General Melvin F. McNichol. He was Base Commander, Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. Why is he important? Because he was friends with Charlotte Mann. Okay, and here's his obituary. Daily, Oklahoma, July 11th, 1986. Ex-Tinker Commander Melvin McNichol dies. So he was a real person. He was the base commander. He was friends with Charlotte Mann, who was involved in kind of a tangential way, directly actually, because she held the photograph
Is
that her grandfather
is she
had.
the lady from Missouri or someplace
Yes,
like that?
that's correct.
Yes. Okay.
That's correct. So she held that photograph. She knew the base commander. And so they struck up a conversation. And she said, General, we've been friends for years now, and we have this kind of mutual interest. Why haven't you told me anything about UFOs? And he turned to her and said, Charlotte, don't you ever repeat what I'm about to tell you, because it could ruin my career, and I'll deny it if you do. So what he told her is 3 things. Number 1, he saw a UFO which was located in the West. Number 2, he walked around a UFO on a catwalk which was propped up by scaffolding. Number 3, bodies were recovered and one was still alive. When I heard that from Charlotte Mann at IUFOC 4 years ago, I said, boom, I got it. Because this is almost identical to what the Marine had said. The Marine said that he guarded a craft that was up on scaffolding. He also said that he was on a plane 3 hours from Cherry Point, North Carolina. So if you fly from North Carolina and you go 3 hours, that theoretically puts you in the West. So that checks out. He talked about the catwalk. He talked about the scaffolding. He overheard water cooler talk about bodies, and one was still alive. And so when I had the independent source from Charlotte who knew Melvin McNichol, I said, boom, we got it. Because these two are tracking and they don't even know each other. And they're describing virtually the identical scenario.
My goodness. I guess this is just amazing. Now, is this fairly new information here, Michael?
Well, I mean, it's something
I've
that
never,
go ahead.
I've never heard you discuss this particular case.
I've discussed it before, but I'm constantly getting new information, new drawings, new illustrations, and trying to make the case stronger, make the case stronger. And when you put that together with the other cases, now you have a full cross section and we haven't even gotten into the latest drawings that we've done of the Stringfield. We haven't even gotten there yet. So
I wish we had more time.
We'll go as far as time allows. Okay, so here's the question. Could the public handle the truth regarding UFO disclosure? So let's take it from the vantage point of someone who's been to the promised land, who has seen the craft, who's seen the reality. Here's what the Marine said, quote, "There's a certain amount of people who, if the thing was on display down the street, would still rather stay home and watch football." Statement by U.S. Marine, August 22nd, 1986.
That's a fact. I know
there
it.
You go.
I know that firsthand.
There you go.
That's a sad fact.
There's a cross section of society, which we know because we're in the field, who would be excited and just screaming and hands up in the air. And finally, we're there. We got disclosure. We're so excited. And there's other people that couldn't care less. It's like they'd be furious that some news anchor would break in with this story, and it would be interrupting their I Love Lucy reruns. That's how upset they would be about it.
The biggest story.
The biggest story
in
of all
human
time.
History.
In
of all
human
time.
history. Yes. Yep. And so you can see the large. You could call it a chasm. You could call it a Grand Canyon of difference, but there's a huge difference in the people's reaction on what this truth would mean to people. Some people just don't care. They don't have a curious bone in their body.
That's
that's just how it goes down.
Yeah.
So according to this Marine, we're there. We're at a point where we're ready to take it on. We're ready to take it on.
Wow.
All right. Here's my question. What did Kennedy know about UFOs? When did he know it, and who did he tell? That's my question. If he died November 22nd,
that's a lot of people's question.
And this event occurred in December of 1963, literally days and weeks later, and that craft could have been there a month prior to, it's feasible that President Kennedy could not only have seen it, he could have touched it, he could have known about it, he could have had a briefing about it. Is there any connection there? I can't prove that. I can't prove he saw it, but the timing checks out because that craft could have been there a month prior to, and so theoretically, we're still within that window of time frame. President Kennedy could have seen that craft.
It makes me wonder how many of our presidents over the years had the need to know, as they put it, about the UFO phenomena taking place.
Yeah, what Michael told me, this is the gentleman that interviewed the Marine, he told me that during the 60s time frame, that this was a much more receptive subject matter within the secret keepers. Like it was a lot more likely to come out during the Kennedy administration than it is now.
Yeah, and I know that I had heard stories about how Richard Nixon had a very keen interest in the whole UFO phenomena.
Yep.
But he, in his years.
That's right. All right, so we're going to continue on here. Now, we should mention that Roswell is not the first crash retrieval.
Yeah.
We've got some very good evidence indicating that a crash retrieval did take place April 20, 1941, and our primary eyewitness is Reverend William Hoffman. He was the primary witness on this case, and it was around 9:30 p.m. at night, and a knock on the door occurs. And he basically opens up the door. There's a policeman there, and he states, I think we've got a crash of an aircraft. And so he got in the passenger side. They drove 15 minutes across town. They got to a farmer's field. The military wasn't there yet. And what they saw was about a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that had a major hull breach on the side of it. There were 3 bodies there. They were dressed in a approximately, you could say, tight-fitting blue flight suit that went up to their necks. They were about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose, nostrils. One was still alive. There were police there. There were fire present there. There were a lot of farm people around. There was debris on the ground. There were some burning embers in the back. Now, he did look kind of inside the craft, and he could see buttons and switches and dials and levers, a very mechanical looking contraption inside. But then, and here you see Reverend William Huffman here. This is one of the sources for this story. So it's MUFON Journal, November 2001. Charlotte Mann, who we just talked about, she is the surviving witness that handled the photograph, which we're going to talk about.
No relation, by the way.
Aha, okay. So the Reverend, he gets up to one of these bodies, and it expires 60 seconds after he got there. So he got there just before it passed away. He described it. Here you see him kneeling over it. At this time, the military is on site, and this is a brand new diorama. This is kind of a world exclusive. My friend Ron Mason, he did a diorama depicting the scene here, so I'm going to walk you through the scene. Here you see the crash, and this is pretty much fairly to scale. He did the best job he could, did a really good job. We've got the fire truck here, we've got the bodies. Military is on site at this point. Here you've got the craft, we've got the hull breach, we've got the 3 bodies, and just to give you an idea what it looked like. Now, while all this is going on, there's newspaper photographers that are taking photographs of the debris, the craft, the bodies, and 2 farmhands pick up one of these dead alien corpses. They support it under its armpits, and they outstretch its arms. And this newspaper photographer, he snaps a photograph of this thing. This is a very rough sketch. That photograph was kind of handed down through the family. Now, Charlotte Mann, pictured on the left here, she held this photograph multiple times. And somewhere around 1974, that photograph was lended to a quote-unquote neighbor who was a photographic analysis expert. And you can see where this is going, Jim.
Yeah.
You can see where this is going. That photograph disappeared.
I was going to say, yeah.
It disappeared. So here again, this is the second time now, we were so close to getting this evidence, and yet it disappears. It snatched right out of our hands. So I put all the information that we could get together, what Charlotte said, what the bodies look like, what the field looked like, the farmhands that were there. We put all that information together, and I built a replica of this photograph, and here's what we came up with. So here is the replica. Again, this is over 80 years old now. So she said it had scallop edges, these old black and white photographs that had those scallop edges that you see in these old photo albums. It probably was stained, might have coffee stained, it was faded, it might have got burnt, might have got caught on fire. And so this is what I came up with of what it may have looked like if you were actually holding the actual photograph in your hand. All right.
That's a pretty good recreation.
Yeah, well, we did the best we could, you know.
Yeah.
I want to give credit for Tom Bogan for doing these illustrations.
Oh, was that Tom? Okay.
No, this is Tom. Now, of course, I aged it, right? To give you an idea, I aged it, which was a fun project on its own. I'm not claiming this is the photograph. This is a replica based on what we think it might have actually looked like. Now, here's a question. Where could you hide 3 extraterrestrial bodies and a circular craft or debris of unknown origin back in 1941? So I'll ask you, Jim, where would you hide this if you were in charge of this retrieval operation back in 1941? Where would you hide it?
Well, in 41, I would guess, knowing what I know today, I would guess Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I don't know.
Okay, well, let's see. In 41, I don't even know if it was there.
Was Wright-Patterson there?
It certainly wasn't Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. It was Wright Field,
Wright Field.
Wright Field at the time. It didn't become Wright-Patterson Air Force Base until 1947. But okay, how about we store it at the Pentagon? Would that be a good location at the Pentagon?
That would be a very secure place.
Okay, but here's a problem with that, because the Pentagon didn't exist. It didn't exist yet in 1941. The Pentagon didn't exist. So where they hit it.
There goes my history lesson.
Okay, no, that's okay. Hey, that's, we do the best we can. In 1941, according to one book, it was stored at an underground vault at the National U.S. Capitol building in Washington,
Really?
D.C. That's where it was stored. Paul Blake Smith did multiple books on this particular case, and he wrote a book describing how we believe that it was stored at the underground vault at the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Now, what I want to do now is I want to take you inside the vault here, inside the basement, and this is what it may have looked like inside the basement. Now, we've got the debris here. We've got the bodies in large glass vertical containers. Some of the debris is poking out of some of these boxes. Tom did a really good job, and this may have been what it looked like. So you could get access to this facility if you had the proper credentials and if you had a need to know. And
well,
so,
it looks like something out of a Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of a movie.
Something out of Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's correct. That's correct. Okay, so I think we've got a little bit of time left to talk about this. Now, this is a retyped memo from FDR to General George C. Marshall, dated February 27, 1942. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I want to drill down on just a couple of sentences here. I have considered the disposition of the material in possession of the Army that may be of great significance toward the development of a super weapon of war. I disagree with the argument that such information should be shared with our ally, the Soviet Union. Consultation with Dr. Bush and other scientists on the issue of finding practical uses for the atomic secrets learned from the study of celestial devices precludes any further discussion, and I therefore authorize Dr. Bush to proceed with the project without further delay. So let's go back to the date, 1942.
42.
All right, now let's drill down on these. Material in possession. That's the first thing, Jim. They're talking about material in possession. So in 1941, they've got one. In 1942, we just had the Battle of Los Angeles, and we know that one craft was retrieved from the Battle of Los Angeles. So now we're talking two crash retrievals in possession by the U.S. government, the military. They've already got two craft, Jim, by 42.
I'll be.
They've already got two craft. Now, look at this. They're talking about a super weapon of war. So now, not only do they have the craft, they're talking about reverse engineering the technology so they can develop a super weapon of war. That's the next thing. Then they talk about here atomic secrets learned from celestial devices. Jim, who uses that term, celestial devices?
Celestial
Why
devices.
would FDR use the term celestial devices? He's got to be referring to these crash retrievals. And then they talk about atomic secrets, Jim. It's like they're trying to reverse engineer the propulsion system and then crack the gravity barrier and use these on our atomic powered aircraft and spacecraft. That's what it sounds like.
We were in the throes of World War II at this point. And this opens up a million possibilities here.
It does.
Yes.
It opens up a whole different world. And again, this memo is dated 42. How long have we had when we throw billions of funding into these projects and you've got perhaps thousands of people working on this thing over decades? You're going to get something for your money. You're going to get something for your money. You're absolutely going to get something. How far they went, who knows?
Michael, we're climbing up on the end of our time here.
Okay.
Patricia, how much time do we have left? Probably just a couple of minutes here. Uh, we got 5 minutes. So
We got 5 minutes.
What can you tell me in 5 minutes, Mike?
Well, all I would say is if you want to do another segment at another time, that's fine. We can get into the crash retrievals from Leonard Stringfield, specifically the artwork. But I wanted to start here because we kind of have everything in numeric order. These are all in date, so they're all been presented in numeric order, and we're kind of working our way through here. I did the first one out of order because I wanted to get those new illustrations out there, so those were mission critical. But what I'm just presenting here is when you look at these crash retrieval cases from Leonard Stringfield. Now, I documented 119 of them through all the status reports. If you went to Vegas, Jim, and you had a roulette wheel and there were 119 slots and you put down 118 bets, are you going to lose?
No, you're not going to.
You're going to win every time. Yeah. And so what that means is, are some of these hoaxes? Sure. Are some of them liars? Sure, but not all of them. We got 119-1 odds, and the odds are in our favor.
Wow, this is amazing. You know, we are going to throw a bookmark in this, Mike. And
sure.
We can do a back-to-back. I can have you next week.
That's fine. That we can get to the sketches now. I definitely want to get to the sketches. We can leave that for the next one.
Yeah, we'll do a back-to-back on this for those that are listening, and a week from now we'll have another program. But in conclusion, Mike, what can you tell us?
Sure. I would just say that it's important that we maintain an important part of our national history by really getting into these cases, by getting them illustrated, allowing people to see these things, because we want to make them come alive. And what we want to do is we want to identify more eyewitnesses, because a major portion of the cases in this book are over 50, 60, and 70 years old. We're way beyond pushing the undertaker, Jim. We're way beyond it. We're running on fumes here to get these eyewitnesses to come forward. And so that's the goal. We want to make these people, we want to allow them the opportunity to come forward, tell their story, so we can have supporting evidence for these crash retrieval cases and get these cases out. That's the goal.
Yeah, and Michael, I know you've got a book, correct?
Yeah.
You still have that, and that's, if nothing, that book, I think, should be required reading for investigators of ufology. I sincerely believe that. Is there somewhere online that people can go and look at some of your stuff? And
Sure. The book is called Dark Files, A Pictorial History of Lost, Forgotten, and Obscure UFO Encounters. It's available on Amazon. It's all illustrated. I mean, anything I do, it's got pictures and drawings and illustrations and sketches. And I give you the source material so you can verify where I got the information. That's the key to it. I'm not going to just throw something up there unless I have something to back it up with. So I give you the article, the page number, the magazine, periodical listing, so that you can verify it. And then the other reference is my YouTube channel called Blue Room Media.
What is that again? Repeat that.
It's called Blue Room Media, one word.
Blue Room Media, one word.
Blue Room. It's an homage to the Blue Room at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay, gotcha. Well, Michael, it's been a very quick 45 minutes. It's a 1-hour program, and everything just seems to go so fast.
Sure.
You are an amazing person, Mike. I've known you a long time, and your drawings are next to none as far as I'm concerned. You just bring everything to life. So everyone, please join us again next week for part 2 of Michael Schratt.
We'll do it.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us, Mike.
Yep.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Dark Window here on KGRA Digital Broadcasting.
Thanks, Jim.